Hi, David. Yeah, I came home and basically my laptop is not charging for some reason, so I'm just basically gonna go read each question and answer it accordingly. I've done my research. I got my paperwork here, and yeah, so basically evaluate the contribution of behavioral finance literature in relation to the understanding of decisions which individuals make. Okay, the traditional economic methods is based on the fact that humans are completely rational and they don't deviate much from the mean, whatever the mean is, whatever the standard is quantitatively, meaning that humans have the ability to process all the information efficiently and make the most utility maximizing decision that they could possibly make. Whereas we know in the real world, as a human being, that's impossible. What it takes a human to process a million years, it would take a high frequency trading robot probably a fraction of a second. So this idea of humans behave rational in regards to and they have all the information which they need to process the information, execute, and it's unbiased. There is no heuristics. It's just completely not applicable to the to the way humans behave. Humans are emotional and subject to irrationality, and they can change their opinion based on false evidence, facts, and emotions, and uh, factors that are completely out of the blue. A person may make a decision not having all the information uh, and anchor a lot of information to the previous information that were given, um, which which is might be completely relevant to the next decision which they need to make. And on that basis, I'm going to basically behavioral finance comes into the gap where the traditional economics expectations do not are not met in the real world. Human behavior does not match the optimal outcome. Humans don't make their best decisions for themselves and for everyone else, basically, and it baffles a lot of investors. So this is where behavioral economics comes in and tries to explain the social factors that might influence one's thinking, or there might be emotional factors, or there might be conscious biases or unconscious biases, which we will delve in and talk about. Depending on which paper you read, there are different papers talking about what influences one's decision. Um, as we have a short time, I'm not going to go delve into all the factors, but I'm going to go to six main ones, which was discussed in the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Um, The first heuristic I'm going to talk about is the fear of regret. That's when you made a bad choice and you're now stuck with it. For example, like how many times have you, when you was a kid, you did something stupid and you were scared, you were in fear of regret to tell your mother that you did this because you were scared that she was going to tell you off. It's the same scenario happening with the investors when they make a loss. They stick with a stock or decision they made, or an investment that's going adverse to what they originally planned, and they refuse to realize the loss and exit the investment and try to recover in it in some other ways. And the main reason is that because they don't want anybody else to know, they just sort of delve into themselves and they just like scared. Instead, what they do is they stay with that stock, hoping that it somehow is going to go back up or it's going to go to the original plan, and they don't want to really discuss it with anybody, and they're shy from it, and they're ashamed to admit that they're wrong. So this kind of behavior is very common from childhood all the way to the investors at the stock exchange making decisions. Another example is the mental accounting behaviors. Humans have the tendency to place particular events into mental counterparts, and the difference between these counterparts sometimes impacts our behavior more than the events themselves. Meaning that, let's say a investor puts its money in stocks and shares during the boom, and they boom and the shares go up, and he makes a modest gains and profits and takes his money out. Next time there is another boom, and he expects that the basically the same scenario is going to happen, the same outcome, the same boom, and the stock's going to go up in the same manner. We know that that's not true. Um, so one example is that when investors refuse to sell a stock after making good gains, because they think that it's not replicating the previous time how the boom happened, and even though every single economic cycle has its own explanations and its own different reasons why there was a recession. Every recession was, so far as we know, was different. So this is where the investor has a gain in their head or a goal which they expect the boom cycle or the recession, if you're short selling, would needs to hit before them they sell the stock and realize their gains. The third assumption I'm going to talk about is the prospect theory and loss aversion. It just basically suggests that losses feel much worse than equivalent amount of gains on a given risk level. Meaning that, let's say you put £50,000 at risk and you lose £50,000, feels much worse than equivalently gaining £50,000 and realizing that you have increased in value. So if you were to plot gains and losses on the x-axis and happiness or sadness on the y-axis, you would see that emotional reaction to the equivalent gains and losses is not equivocal, it's not continuum, meaning that the losses feel much worse than the equal amounts of gains. This also explains why investors hold on to losing stocks. The reason being is that they feel much worse and then they feel awful about losing. So they try to maybe sometimes even double their risk or triple their risk, hoping that the stock is going to come back, so they can regain their ego or the confidence they had initially, and they can prove that they were right. So fourth one is anchoring behavior. Anchoring behavior is when you link one information to another information. For example, you have a particular expected return on a technology sector as a whole. So you think that a particular stock has to match that kind of return, regardless of who's running the company or who the CEO is. For example, like the technology sector is growing by 5.6%, so you expect that Tesla has to grow at least 5.6%, even though Tesla is probably like completely different to any other technology sector. So it's just an anchor that you've sort of have in your head. I know I said six originally, but this is seven, and it's quite an important one. I can't miss this one out, and it's the social factors. Social factor means like anything externally that's influenced upon you or to you by the consensus or the way that the governments or individuals are influenced. Meaning that if you, for example, like for a good example is the government now subsidizing green energy investments. So the social factors forces the economic hands to go from a self-interest perspective, such as like an investor looking for absolute Sharpe ratio or absolute return on a stock, to think about the whole general impact of the investment on society as a whole. For example, if you were to invest in weaponry or stock or oil and things like that, which contributes negatively or has a negative societal impact, you'd be seen by your peers and your social environment and your group or by your government as a bad person. So that surely influences how you make investment decisions. Also, the individual's social culture and norms play a role. Such as, for example, like a investor who's Muslim is not going to basically likely to be investing in alcohol stocks or anything related to tattoo or destruction of weapons and bombs and things like that. It just basically makes you conscious of the externalities and the impact on other people of your actions with in relation to investment and economic money terms. The last question, evaluate the links between biology, psychology, and economics. Well, this is a very vague question, David, because biology, do you mean biology in terms of gender or species? Also, what stage of biology? Like in terms of like fetus biology, there is no psychology and economics. Or if someone is retired, there is a lot of psychology and economics. And if you were to say psychology of every society is different. Like for example, a Muslim investor or Arab world or in the Middle East, um, economics it's in terms of economics, interest is not allowed. As you may know, in Quran, Quran forbids interest, and therefore a lot of investors don't lend money; they just rent it, uh, which is literally the same thing in different terms, but without the interest. So taken to it, like they don't call it interest, but so if I were to say biologically, a turtle might have a different psychology and economic um, perspective to a bee because the bee is selfless and it only lives 27 days. It has a different time horizon, and whereas the turtle lives about the sea turtle lives about 100 years. So its investment lifespan is much longer. Time horizon is much longer. And economics, in terms of economics, economics doesn't have to be money; it can be energy expenditure, right? So that's how economics is defined: human value or energy output of a particular species. But overall, you could say that amongst all, what's true amongst all species is that they try to maximize their own survival and ability to pass on their genes. So Darwin said was that it's not the most strongest species that survive, but it's the ones that are most adaptable to change. Meaning that in terms of economics, instead of trying to maximize economics in terms of absolute returns, we should have more a adaptable approach to economics where it follows trends and tries to solve the differences between a bust and a boom to make the shocks absorbed and basically easier to deal with as human beings. So basically, I would like to spend the last 1 minute to critique the Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman book. In his book, what he explains is a system one and a system two, which is the system one is the fast reacting and low energy rule of thumb thinking, whereas the other one is more costly, more energy, um, more thoughtful process of decision making. Um, I would like to add to that system zero, system minus one, and system minus two. This comes from the Newton law of motion. For every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. Now, bear with me. I'm gonna discuss this. System one is when you don't. System zero is when you're not thinking at all. That's when you are sleeping. Now you're thinking to yourself, "Well, this is about economics." Well, if you are doing nothing, then you're losing money because of time value of money. And then there is a system minus one where someone else has made your decision for you. Like for example, David, you talk about in the classes that a lot of decisions are made by your wife, like how much, like which colored t-shirt or something like that to buy. That's the short term. And then there is long term decisions that, let's say, for example, system minus two, what we're seeing is that like Ukraine in being in war, where it's out of its own decision making, out of its own choice, it's being dragged into some other territory, which is adversely impacted on. and it's not its decision at all. So yeah, I would like to end with that, David. Thank you.